It has been 20 years since 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey was found brutally murdered, and her case still has not been solved. In a new 6-hour CBS Docuseries, original investigators of the unsolved mystery and murder reunite to re-examine the events of this very tragic case. One of the investigators joins us now, former New York City prosecutor and FBI profiler Jim Clemente, along with the executive producer of the case of JonBenet Ramsey. We thank both of you all for being with us. And Tom, you were the executive producer here, so I want to start with you. If you will, tell me a little bit about how this project came together and why you wanted to do the project.
Sure. Jim came to us a few months ago and said that he was frustrated, that like so many of the original investigators on the case, hadn't been able to talk to the people he wanted to talk to, hadn't been able to do the investigation he wanted to do. Sometimes because he was told not to, sometimes because people wouldn't talk, sometimes because the technology didn't exist back in 1996 and 1998 to tear this case apart and solve it. He thought, as did some of the other original investigators, that if they had access to the resources of a big television show, if they had the time to go back and really work this case in 2016, that they could make progress for the first time in 20 years. That was exciting for me.
All right, so Jim, if you will, tell me then about your role as being a former prosecutor on this case or an investigator on this case. What have you been able to find out now, or that you weren't necessarily able to put together when this case first broke?
Yeah, I was a prosecutor in New York before I became an FBI profiler, but in the Behavioral Analysis Unit in the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime, we looked at all violent and sexual crimes in the country, and I'm an expert in the area of child abduction and child abduction homicides. So this fits squarely into my area of expertise. And we looked at the case a number of times over the course of my career, but when I retired, I was very upset that it was still unresolved. And myself and my colleagues like Laura Richards and Jim Fitzgerald, Dr. Lee, Dr. Spitz, James Kohler and Stan Burke, we all decided to get together and actually do a reinvestigation so that we could, with our different professions, with our different perspectives, tear this case apart, drill down into all the theories, decide what's real and what isn't real, and tell the world what really happened in December of 1996.
Now, as part of this process, you all went back and meticulously rebuilt some of the key rooms in the Ramsey House. So talk about that, and it had to be extremely strange to be back in that scenario.
Yeah, we rebuilt whole floors of the Ramsey House. Jim and the team came to the television producers and said if they were really going to do this, if they were going to try to make progress in the case, they needed access to the crime scene. Problem is the crime scene's been renovated. The Ramsey House is still standing, but doesn't look like it did in 1996, and that basement where the body was found is gone. We took a 70,000 square foot warehouse in Boulder, Colorado, and rebuilt the critical rooms and floors. We used original blueprints, crime scene photos, videography, to get everything from the wallpaper to the carpet exactly the way it was back in 1996 so that these guys could go inside and do their investigation.
Yeah, it's a critical part of a crime scene reinvestigation or crime scene reconstruction to actually be in the space that the crime occurred in. So you can look at spatial relationships, you can look at ingress and egress, and you can see how people would have moved about and whether things were possible or not based on different theories. So we're able to disprove and prove theories, we're able to find new evidence, and we're able to actually come to solid conclusions about what happened that day.
There are several projects on JonBenet that are coming out right now as we get to this 2-decade mark. Yeah. If you will, talk about how this one is a little bit different, the CBS project, than some of the other ones that are out there.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I am certain, those other projects will do a good job of looking backwards, of using archival video and interviews to tell you the story of what happened 20 years ago. We do a little of that, but truthfully, that wasn't that interesting to us. Ours is about looking forward, about following a real-time investigation of this case that is a lot more like an episode of CSI or Criminal Minds than it is a retroactive documentary about the events of 20 years ago.
Well,
we actually have real investigators leading an investigation as opposed to just documenting something that happened before. We are all really invested in moving this case forward to get justice for JonBenet.
Well, we are very excited to see this project and to look back, too. We thank both of you all for being with us today.
Should be interesting. The 4-hour docuseries, The Case of JonBenet Ramsey, premieres this Sunday night at 7:30 p.m. with part 2 wrapping things up on Monday night at 8 right here on News Channel 5.